Martin Scorsese,
Yes, the legend of cinema.
famous only for shitting on Marvel a couple of months ago. Martin Scorsese, like I said, an absolute legend of cinema who has directed at least one of most people's favorite films.
Yes.
About a year or so, maybe even 2 years ago now, he made a comment in an interview about Marvel isn't cinema. I never read that interview. I took a little bit of notice of the discourse around it, paid not too much attention. But then the fire got stoked again yesterday when he was saying that comic books are bad for cinema. Comic book movies are bad for cinema. In a GQ article.
Yes.
And I saw the Discord getting out of hand again. And I was like, fuck it. This time I'm going to read the full article. I'm going to get full context. And then me and you are going to discuss it.
Yes.
And we're going to put an end to this once and for all. So I don't think Martin is saying anything unfair. I think we are getting one of them situations where people are defending the stuff they care about with such vigor they miss the point.
Yeah. Agreed.
Which I understand. It always sucks when you feel like someone's attacking something you care about.
Yeah.
But as a result of that, they're missing the point, which is actually a valid point. So, Martin Scorsese did a whole big interview about being an old man in film, essentially, and how he's dealing with the looming threat of death, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
And it was actually a very good interview. It was very insightful. I enjoyed reading it a lot. And only a very small portion of it was about comic book movies and modern cinema.
Yeah, it wasn't even, I would say, specifically about comic book. It was like franchise.
Yes.
And
basically his whole point was cinema is art. And while he accepts that there has to be a commercial element to it, going all commercial means that anyone who's not making a commercial film is seen as an indie film, and as a result, they don't get the budgets they sometimes deserve. Like for a long time, Martin Scorsese made these independent films, but they still had massive budgets.
Yeah.
And he's saying these franchises are creating this world where any film that's not a franchise is classed as an indie, but now indie films get no big budgets.
Yeah.
The one quote that really had Twitter losing its mind was like, we need to fight back against comic book movie culture. And what he really meant was franchise culture.
Yeah.
Is with someone like Chris Nolan. And everyone's grabbed that and went, you mean Chris Nolan who started it all by doing the Dark Knight trilogy? And again, people just miss the point massively because he's not saying that Chris Nolan specifically. He's talking about these people who are directors that have a voice and are actually trying to make art and are not just
I would
making
argue
whatever a studio pays
the
them to
reason
do.
he says Christopher Nolan, other than the fact that like it's Christopher Nolan, is the fact that like he recently did Oppenheimer, which like is I would say
the biggest biopic of all time.
Yeah, is cinema. It's not a franchise thing, and it's been huge. And it's been great for cinema, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, this is reviving cinema." That's probably why I brought it up. I also would like people are missing that. Even in the article, the interviewee, he's like, puts like, "I know I shouldn't really be like, I know I'm going to bring flack at Scorsese because of this question, and that I am prodding the fire." Like, he's very well aware of bringing this up and what it's going to cause. But Martin Scorsese is like, no, it's like, this needs to be discussed. And I think there's a lot of, like, people obviously, like you say, see that one point, run with it. That's all they see on the internet. They don't go read. But there's like several points in there, that article, where he's talking about, he's done films that are funded by Warner Brothers. I forget which film it was exactly, but it's the two male characters, whoever, die in the film. And Warner Brothers were like, is there a way that one of them doesn't? And it's like based off a book and based off of something in history. And it's like, no, they're both dying. And it's like Warner Brothers were essentially being like, yeah, but if one of them lives, that's a franchise. we
Yeah.
we can make another film, and there's a franchise here. And he was going on about like that's all that Hollywood cares about, and these studios like Warner Brothers, they just want the next franchise. They don't care about a good story. They don't care about like meaning in any of these films. They just want to pump out as many of them as they can, which we've seen through Fast and Furious, like Invincibles,
I mean, Expendables.
Expendables, sorry. There's like all these franchises that everyone's going, oh, really? Another one, Transformers. Like, just really? We're milking it. But it
Yeah.
explains it. Like, he also talks several times about how like Hollywood just isn't good for cinema. And often he says, oh, I'm not doing that again, but the budgets, that's the only place to get the budgets. And he ends up making these films. And then afterwards, he's like, fuck's sake, I've got roped into this thing again.
Yeah.
And he gets shoehorned in a certain way because
Yeah,
all
he
they care
said he
about is
retired
making money.
like 3 times because just working with big studios is so tedious.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, his point was comic book movie culture isn't a problem.
No.
But if that's all that's getting made, it's
That's
not culture anymore.
Well, yeah, and he's saying that it's getting to the point where these franchises and comic book films are all that the studios want to make. So then that's all that's in cinema, and then people get mad because that's all they know is cinema. When
Yeah.
something else comes out, they don't want to go watch it because they're like, "Oh, this isn't what I'm used to going to see. This isn't
In
some big
reality,
franchise."
would it not be lovely? I know, like, and I'm not trying to be pessimistic here. We love our nerd stuff, and we know that it's not necessarily high cinema or super deep art, but we love it, and that is fine.
Mm.
It is fine to like stuff.
Yeah.
Would it not be a lot nicer if we just had 6 nerd films a year that we have to worry about every other month, and then the months in between we get to just both look at what's coming out and go, should we go see that?
Mm.
Just choose a random fucking film that might be shit. It might be great. We might go see a Scorsese film, a Tarantino film. We might also go see some shit horror film that is absolutely going to be horrific. And then we just get to talk about it. Because that used to be something that was really, really common.
Yeah.
Friends would just go and see whatever was on at
Yeah.
the cinema and then they'd have a chat about it. Whereas now it feels like you only go to the cinema when your franchise is showing something,
Mm-hmm.
and that sucks because I adore the cinema. It's one of my favorite places to be, and the notion that it's just all going to be franchise films, and soon I'm only going to go to the cinema to see DC, Marvel, and Star Wars, and nothing else.
Yeah.
Sucks.
Yeah, it does. But it's like he's right in that it's gonna take more of these big name directors to push back. And he's like Martin Scorsese is doing it with like he has set up his own independent fund for indie films and he's helping other people make these films that he likes to start like he wants to see them be made, so he's helping them. And it's like that's his focus now.
Yeah.
But I think people, like you say, see one little like quote on the internet and someone slightly misquoting it like to be all about superhero films. Like, oh my god, he's just hating on superhero films again. It's like, no.
Put it this way. Like, let's be honest here. I'm not saying we are anywhere near the level of GQ or Martin Scorsese. But last week, we were talking about the Aquaman trailer.
Yes.
And I said, while we were discussing it, I'm going to be disappointed if the baby doesn't die. We got off the call and instantly were like, that has to be a soundbite for one of the shorts this week. Because even we know that even if it's out of context sometimes, something so jarring and catching you off guard gets attention.
Yeah.
So Scorsese will say this just to say he won't be doing it to get attention. But the person writing the article and then the chief editor who's going to decide what the headline is.
Well, yeah,
going to run with that.
That's the thing. The guy doing the interview and writing the article says in it he knows that like this is going to bring flack to Martin Scorsese. Martin Scorsese knows that answering this and discussing about this is going to like poke the fire. They know what it's going to cause, and it's like neither of them are hiding from the fact that they're going to that this is gonna get used to as the article point, and it's gonna be the thing that everyone latches onto. They know that, but they also like Martin Scorsese doesn't give a shit. He's 82. Like, he doesn't care what people on the internet think about him anymore. He's just trying to make the next film that he wants to make.
Like, in reality, are we discussing the article right now if the headline, despite it only being like the smallest paragraph in the entire 15-minute read article, wasn't about comic book movies? No. We probably wouldn't even know the article exists.
Yeah. We would have probably been like, oh, Martin Scorsese's done an article because he's like getting old.
Yeah. Yeah, if the title was Scorsese's almost dead, what does he think about it? No one's clicking. I mean, some people will click. That's very reductive. There are a lot of people who would care about that. But there is a massive subset of people like ourselves who are going to be like, oh, cool.
They're like
me and you are intelligent guys. We can read. But even we were like, oh, a 15-minute article. That was a bit long. And I was like a little bit embarrassed to myself. So I'm like, I used to read books, like massive books in like a day. And I was like, I had to stop and get a drink in the middle of this article.
I mean, this article,
and it was a good article.
The article as well could have very easily just been titled "Hollywood is killing cinema," or like something of that effect, and it's not like, and that still would have garnered impressions. It's just like, yeah, people falling for a classic internet like headline.
And what is not helped is Twitter's new payment system, paying for impressions.
Yeah.
Because you just get people, and it's like you just get people tweeting the most batshit insane stuff to farm impressions because impressions actually make the money.
Yep.
So if you see cutscene convos get verified, don't worry about it.